Hey guys, it's Mike here, and in this video I want to discuss a topic related to Goku, and more specifically, his choice of wardrobe. And that would have to be, why did Goku stop wearing weighted clothing in the Dragon Ball story? Because for anyone who's been watching for a considerable length of time, you'll know that Goku has employed this in the past when it came to training and beyond. Well, I'm going to be getting in depth into that topic right now in this video, going into the manga and breaking it down. But before I start, make sure to subscribe and enable all notifications so you can stay up to date with all my future videos. Additionally, leave a like and share your own thoughts down below in the comments, as well as sharing this video out so that it can be seen by even more people. We can continue to grow and make even more videos like this. But with that being said, let's get into the video. Now, Goku originally debuted this weighted clothing in the 23rd tournament during his fight against Ten Shinhan in that battle, in which we saw that after Tien had ramped up his speed to its full, he was actually starting to get the better of Goku. However, at this point, Goku asked him, "Do you think that I would be able to take off my clothing?" And Tien said, "Yeah, why? Do you think it's getting hot in here?" Goku said, "You trained very hard too," which he's complimenting Tien on. However, this would become a very clear difference in their power and speed after Goku started to take off these clothes. Dropping this shirt on the ground with a thud, Tien takes notice immediately, asking if he could examine the clothes, and starts to see that they are in fact weighted. And this starts to happen even more so as he takes off the weighted wristbands, the weighted boots, and then everyone starts to ask him just how heavy everything is. His boots individually, according to Goku, are about 50 pounds, and Tien says that overall his clothing is about 250 pounds, or roughly 113 kilograms for those using the metric system, which is a lot of weight for anyone to be wearing spread across their entire body, especially when they're moving at super speeds and are constantly having to make all these adjustments at most likely faster than light speeds, as we see Goku demonstrate during his various fights, which no doubt was one of the big things that led to Goku's great increase between the King Piccolo arc and this one, because the fact that he was training while wearing those under Kami. And we see just how fast Goku really is as he's able to get the better of Tien, even removing his belt and causing him to drop his pants and reveal his boxers underneath. Now, interestingly, Goku would go on to face against Demon King Piccolo Jr. However, it's not actually stated at this point that Piccolo is wearing weighted clothing, even though we would go on to see that this very outfit would be weighted in the future, and it does make sense because after all, he likely got the same idea from the same place that Kami did, which would either be the Nameless Namekian or the internal mental link that they share. And Piccolo would go on to wear these weighted clothing for the rest of the franchise. And not just Piccolo, but also the Human Z Fighters or Dragon Team that we see train with Kami on his Lookout or Heavenly Realm, during which they were able to surpass him, and again, they were all wearing weighted clothing at the same time, which Yajirobe, after the training is complete, makes a statement about having to want to actually take all of it off, which that definitely seems in line with his character. But for some reason, Goku, as we see here, does in fact stop wearing them eventually. And let's get into more context as to why that actually happens going into his training on King Kai's planet. Because when Goku arrives there, he's training under 10 times gravity, which is the natural gravity of that planetoid that King Kai has in that other dimension. At this point, you could see he's barely able to move under the gravity because his weighted clothing, which is most likely at least the same amount of weight that it was before, the 250 pounds, is multiplied to being over 1 ton of 2,500 pounds. And we see him actually take off the weighted clothing and then is able to chase after Bubbles the monkey much faster. We even see King Kai taking a impressed look at this whole situation, saying, "Oh ho, he was already wearing super weighted gear." However, King Kai does instruct Goku to continue to wear the weighted gear because it'll actually make the training much more effective, which makes sense because after all, Goku's going to be training in 10 times the gravity on his home planet of Earth, well, really his adoptive home planet, and also at the same time wearing weighted clothing that are going to be, in fact, 10 times heavier and thus 10 times more effective than they were under Kami's. And again, let's think about it like this. It's kind of like Gravity Train, which I'll get a little bit more into at the same time. Every single punch is going to take a lot more energy, strength, and effort, just like every single kick, every single jump, every single movement when you're wearing weighted clothing. But it also is equally taxing on the body in the exact same way, which could be a determining factor. Eventually, after Goku's training with King Kai is done, King Kai actually goes on to give Goku brand new clothing, which no longer has the weights in them, which he says right here, wow, they're really light. And King Kai says, not just light, it's made of an incredibly strong fabric that can even repel minor attacks. So King Kai himself sought to remove the weighted clothing aspect from Goku here, perhaps because the fact that he no longer believed that he needed it to continue with his training, or because the fact that, as we saw, Goku would go on to fight against Vegeta, and King Kai very well might have seen it as being some sort of limitation that Goku would have to remove, and maybe the Saiyans, being very ruthless, wouldn't have even given him the opportunity to. After all, Piccolo actually removed his weighted clothing before they even showed up on the battlefield, so he very likely had the very same idea that the Saiyans wouldn't have even allowed him to take off those weighted clothing, and that in turn could lead to a crucial moment in which they'd get the upper hand permanently over Goku. However, despite that, Goku does not go on to adopt the weighted clothing again. As we see during his fight against Frieza, after Frieza goes into his 50% power and starts to dominate Goku and get the better of him, and Goku is using the Kaioken times 10 and is still getting defeated, we actually see everyone observing on King Kai's planet during this period of time, and Yamcha makes a statement of, Kaio-sama, isn't Goku still weighted down by his weighted gi? And then King Kai says, no, what he has on now is durable, but not heavy, because it is actually a recreation of the same gi that he had gotten when he was on King Kai's planet in the afterlife. How Dr. Brief actually got those clothing, I have no idea. It's never really explained, but they just so happen to be on Goku's training ship when he goes on his way to Namek in the first place. So it's clear that Goku did not continue to use the weighted clothing all throughout the course of the series. And that's even despite the fact that not only does he have Piccolo near him who continues to use that effectively, but also Gohan. As we see, Gohan actually asks Piccolo after he exits the time chamber with Goku to have Piccolo make him clothing just like his own, which he proceeds to do with one of his most powerful and underrated abilities, the clothes beam. Which does raise a whole bunch of questions like, could Piccolo do like a Thor in this situation and just put something so heavy on his opponent that they wouldn't even be able to move in the form of clothing, for example? And just how much weight can Piccolo actually put into his clothing? Do his clothes weigh the same amount, or as Piccolo actually scales up, does he continue to increase his weight in his clothes to eventually where they're so heavy and so dense at his power level in, I don't know, at the end of Z or in Super right now, to where it's basically like wearing dark matter or black hole material that he's constantly hanging around his body. And maybe that thing has a gravitational pull of its own at this point. But nonetheless, as we see, Gohan puts on this clothes, and Goku puts on normal, non-weighted clothing. However, Goku would go on to train again with weights in the afterlife during the Buu Saga, and probably during the 7-year time skip when he's training under King Kai, and we can see that he has these wrist weights and ankle weights that he's wearing right now, which according to King Kai, each weigh 2 tons, which of course is a very large increase from what he was wearing before. With all of this being roughly 8,000 pounds, which is about 32 times greater than the weight that he was wearing in the 23rd tournament arc of Dragon Ball. Of course, a lot of people go to the effort of trying to say that this is way less than Goku should be able to handle at this point in time, and that basically it doesn't make any sense for him to only have 2 tons of weight on here, and that when King Kai turns them all into 10 tons, which then in turn makes it 40,000 pounds, and Goku is struggling to even move or lift them, that is an inconsistent consistent feat in terms of strength. However, I think that also could tie into the idea that ki and strength are not inherently linked in terms of physical strength, in that a character can certainly use their ki in order to augment their strength, but their normal strength is not 100% connected in the exact same way, which is something that I may get into in its own video in the future. But nonetheless, this becomes easy work for Goku when he becomes a Super Saiyan, increasing his power by 50 times, and then is able to speed blitz with each of these different individual strikes. And again, remember, lifting this amount of weight is a lot different than having it strapped to you and then punching and kicking. Somebody who can lift 100 pounds with one arm, curling, isn't necessarily going to be able to punch over and over and over again with that 100 pounds just as easily, while maintaining all of their muscles and not, ripping out their elbow and every other muscle on their arm in the process. So Goku being able to kick at super speed with this amount of weight on him is still very impressive, especially when we don't actually know what the gravity is in heaven. But again, I feel like that Toriyama probably would have adjusted the numbers in order to account for all of that, rather than him just being like, 10 tons and the gravity is like, 10 times that of Earth, which means that Goku would actually have 100 tons on each individual limb, which, again, I don't think is what Toriyama is going for. So Goku definitely does still continue to use some weights when he is training, and he even does that in Dragon Ball Super. However, typically when he's wearing clothing outside of his training, or even during it, he isn't always wearing weighted clothing in and of itself. I wouldn't really count this as clothing unless, you think it's a very interesting sort of fashion statement. So why does Goku not wear weighted clothing anymore where others do? Well, I think it actually ties into a statement that he makes around the same point as this panel on this page that I'm showing you right here, which has to do with his training in the hyperbolic time chamber with Gohan, where Piccolo suggests that Goku and Gohan should use the time chamber again, and Goku says that no, he and Gohan are going to train outside because there's still 9 days left for it to work out and for them to get some rest. At this point, everyone is shocked and they're saying, why won't you do it? And Goku says, it's rough in there, even if I don't do anything. It's best if we rest for now. And Vegeta mocks him, not understanding what Goku's actually saying. So the great Kakarot can't take it. Is the pain too much for you to handle? He says condescendingly. Goku says, maybe. But all that pointless stressing of your body is torture, not training. However, you guys can still use the room if you want. You guys could have room for improvement. So what Goku's saying over here on the right really kind of ties into, I think, a lot of his mentality when it comes to training, and likely tying also into the fact that he is not wearing that weighted clothing, where he's saying all that pointless stressing of your body is torture, not training. So Goku goes on to rest with Gohan during those 9 days, doing a little bit of training outside, and he definitely prioritizes rest, whereas Vegeta does not. Vegeta goes back into the time chamber. Originally, he actually wanted to go in for 8 straight days because he was going to give Piccolo 1, but he doesn't realize, because he is somebody who is constantly pushing himself to his absolute limits, training under intense gravity and everything like that, that resting is just as important, if not more so sometimes, than the means of training itself. After all, if you don't rest your body, how can it ever truly recover to its maximum and allow you to have all of your gains reach their highest potential? If you just keep training and training and training and training, there's such a thing as overtraining, in which your body will start to resist it, it'll break down, and it will actually start to negatively affect you in the long term, which could be a big reason also as to why Vegeta was not able to catch up to Goku even after he went to the time chamber again for a second time. Because the fact that Goku realized what Vegeta did not just in terms of mastering the Super Saiyan form, but additionally that torturing yourself and your body constantly is not conducive to the optimal gains. And of course, Goku knows all of this firsthand because he also trained under intense gravity, which itself is very akin to what would happen with the weighted clothing, except the gravity is contained within a room instead of within weights that are on certain parts of Goku's body, and expanded across his entire body, and not just his muscles, but all of his internal organs, his bones, everything then and there. So Goku knows firsthand what it's like to torture your body to the absolute extreme in order to get gains in terms of power, giving himself Zenkai boost over and over again, which of course a lot of people ask me how could Goku do this also when Vegeta said that it was impossible later in the arc, but I think that, that's maybe something I'll get into in its own separate video in the future. Nonetheless, Goku knows, even though he did get really big gains at this point, there does come a point to where it gets to be too ridiculous, and eventually it might hold you back, which is probably part of the reason why Goku, when he was vastly more powerful after exiting the time chamber with Gohan, started to realize after years and years of doing this type of training, not only on his way to Namek, but then also going into a time chamber that also has 10 times gravity of the Earth, and also extreme conditions like the heat and the cold and the less air, it would no doubt lead to somebody being able to, in turn, be, far more cognizant of this drawback and the problems with it. So I think that with all the evidence combined, we can go into our conclusion. So why did Goku stop wearing weighted clothing? Well, I think that it comes down to, like I said before, his mindset and his experience with wearing the weighted clothing and training under certain types of different training methods, like the intense gravity. Goku realized eventually that living with weighted clothing wasn't necessarily as beneficial as it was during certain types of training exercises, like we see when he's on King Kai's planet, or, when he is training in the afterlife with those weights on. And that even then, those are only certain types of training, because he does also meditate and do other training without ever wearing any weighted clothing at all. Weights definitely have their purpose, and also so does intense gravity, but for Goku, he wants to make sure to also include rest in his regimen, and additionally also wants to focus on other aspects beyond simple brute force and increasing your strength through the increase of the weight and the density that you currently have at that time. So I think that all of that ties into Goku's experience, realizing that constantly wearing weighted clothing was actually not to his benefit, but maybe in the long term to his detriment, and considering the fact that Goku has constantly stayed ahead of other characters who repeatedly and constantly wear that weighted clothing, like Piccolo, for example, beyond just simply the Saiyan genetics and, the basic instant win button that they have in terms of all these different transformations. The fact of the matter is, I think that Goku saw through the need to constantly wear that stuff and realized that going without would probably be the best game plan for him moving forward. But what do you guys think? Let me know your own thoughts down below in the comments. Also, if you're new here, consider subscribing and enabling notifications so you can stay up to date with all my future videos. Like the video if you like it, share it out, and make sure to stick around, because there's a lot more to come in the future.
Yeah, and you better subscribe.